Hello and welcome back. The trailing stop loss from the last video for lazy trading kicked in and made a generous profit. It was a very nice little treat, but we can see that the market has much wider implications as it has stalled, or we seem to be in a region of stagnation. That is what we are going to talk about today. Hello, I am Robert, and let's get to the live chart. We're looking at the GBP Australian dollar chart, and we can see that not much has moved. Economically, though, a lot has happened, and depending upon who you believe, the tariffs that the Trump administration has been leveling out have done their job quite aggressively. It has wrecked a lot of countries' economies and put them in a tailspin. It has brought a lot of hostile players back to the table. If you've been following my Patreon, I've been talking a lot about China's economy lately, and it is in an absolute horrific state. Whether or not you like the economy in that context, unfortunately, the ramifications of it aren't just for China, but it affects the global market in general because of how many countries depend upon Chinese consumer goods or services that are exported. And I'm not necessarily talking the cheap products, but overall significant infrastructure that China does have in place for their imports and exports. The market has been very, very flat, and for them, horrifically bad, to the point that hundreds of millions of tons of food are rotting because their own people can't afford to buy them. In this context, China has become the canary in the coal mine. They have demonstrated very clearly the interconnectedness of all markets and how a government's bad decisions has consequences. The Chinese government has been operating in a war-like state, according to their own news publications. That means they have ramped up production to incredible levels, but they have ramped it up in such a way that they have decimated their own economy. At the rate things are going, their economy is on the verge of collapsing economically. That will have major implications around the world. It's not going to be an easy functionality or capability to deal with on a large market basis. Some people are cheering this collapse, thinking it's going to usher in a new era of democracy for China, and it may very well in the long term. That I don't know, and for the context of this video, it is not really part of my focus. What is part of my focus is the implications of how the United States and Europe are going to have a very bad situation because of this economic turmoil. Whether or not the Trump administration, or for that matter any Western administration that uses tariffs as a leveraged tool, intended on this kind of severity is unknown. It really doesn't matter either. The tariffs have worked. A lot of manufacturers have brought their business back to the United States to avoid the tariffs. So from the standpoint of the back and forth flip-flops, it has caused economic turmoil that has forced a lot of countries to renegotiate their market structures with respect to U.S. trade. Good or bad doesn't matter. That's a discussion for the philosophers in 20 years, whether or not this move worked out. Right now, we see the initial implications of what is really going on. We see it in the actual numbers of various parts of the economy itself, but not just the economy of the United States. Because when you look at tariffs and you talk about tariffs in relation to inflation, hyperinflation, deflation, and stagnation, you have to look at the various other countries involved that also have tariffs or are being affected by tariffs. Tariffs are very common, and if you studied any level of economy over the years, then you know they are literally always in place. There isn't a country on this planet that has any level of imports that doesn't have some kind of a tariff-based system to help normalize and stabilize their economy. It's just part and parcel of such a macroeconomic blueprint or plan that is in operation on a daily basis. That being said, we are seeing stagnation. The market is flat. It's not going anywhere. It's just stuck in a rut. And that isn't just on the GBP Australian dollar, but rather many other assets as well. For example, let's look at the Euro Canadian market, and we can see that flatness as well. Now, in relation to whether or not this is just simple market dynamics, there's no way of knowing that at this point. It's too soon. When we start getting month over month numbers, then we can start making that determination. But there are a wide number of very reputable economists that clearly say we have entered the state of stagnation economically. We have elevated, hyperinflated prices, and they're not dropping. What used to be able to buy 4 bags of groceries now is only being able to buy 1 bag of grocery. And the mark that was used for this analysis was a $100 bill. So for $100 prior to this inflationary period, 4 bags of groceries could be bought. Now, in today's economy, as of this video, that same $100 only buys 1 bag of groceries. And now that's in the United States. Other parts of the world, for example, China, they are literally throwing away hundreds of millions of tons of food because the farmers can't afford to take them to market, and even if they did get them to market at huge losses, the people, the consumers, literally can't afford to buy them even with the huge markdowns. China just went through its Dragon Festival, and it was the worst Dragon Festival in recorded history. Literally millions of tons of food completely unsold and rotting. It's a problem that is becoming an epidemic on its own. How we handle stagnation in trading is a difficult process because flat markets become long-term ranging markets. Stable grid bots can work along with other sniper-like strategies. But the stagnation itself is not the worst part of it. The worst part of it is when the market decides to either hyper-aggressively accelerate upwards in value or equally hyper-aggressively decelerate downwards in value. Meaning, if we look at the current chart right now, let's zoom this in a little bit. We have a clear and distinct range that is being currently followed by the market. That is, price is staying in this range. But what happens if price massively drops downward? Something happens, kind of what we see here, but on a huge downward or cascading slope. That could be a problem economically. That could be the signs of an economic correction, or worse, an economic crash. Likewise, if we have the market shoot up, it could be even worse in that direction, because that means prices could also shoot up, bringing back hyperinflation. So stagnated markets are an incredibly difficult area to be in because they have incredibly difficult situations. Now let's go to a market that is always hyper busy. Now we see the Euro USD market. We see the area I have been looking in. And right now, it's not that stagnant for the market itself between the European dollar and the US dollar. If it becomes stagnant, like we saw with a few of the other assets, that could be a more systemic or larger problem on a global economic level. So far, the market is staying within the range and the limits of what the buyers and sellers are agreeing on. Meaning that we have the upper boundary and the yellow line. This is the upper price point that seems to be holding consistently. And we seem to have a reasonable level that the buyers and sellers have decided right now is the upper limit they want to go. That does not mean that that can't change at any given moment, and it could either tumble downward or shoot upward as it did here, with just a couple of candles, literally just cascade upward in a dramatic methodology or way. So there's a lot to be aware of in the market. And I know I say this a lot, but it really is true. You need to have a worst case scenario plan, no matter what methodology of trading you use. You have to figure out some way of keeping track of just what happens when things really go bad. And they could go bad very easily for your own trading. We can see examples of this when we look at the long-term market and we see just how bad the COVID pandemic affected the market. Now the truth is, China is already talking about COVID 2.0 and a new variant that is incredibly dangerous and untreatable. How that will reflect in the global market is yet to be seen. But we can see right now that the global market, meaning Euro-Canadian correlations, Euro-USD correlations, is trending upwards. Will they break the upper range, or will it cascade down towards lower range? That is a difficult question, and quite frankly, I don't recommend trying to predict it. Try to keep your trades as prepared for the worst case scenario as possible. We can see from the order book the red and green masses in the background, sells and buys, that for the most part the buyers and sellers have agreed on where they want the price to remain. That doesn't mean it won't change overnight. But for now, we can make informed, educated guesses on what's going to happen to the market. And that looks at this point to be possibly in for a correction, meaning price should go downward if the market structure based upon the order books, where orders are actually sitting to be filled, are actually in place. We see there are a few orders up above the range I have been watching, but for the most part, most of the weight is down below this range, where the money is. And that is where the buyers and sellers have aggressively decided where they want the price to stay for the moment. It's not something to take lightly, though, in terms of your planning. Look at every time frame. Look at how those time frames correlate to each other and how many orders are above and below the particular ranges you are looking at. Be prepared to make changes, because a good market could very easily turn into a bad market. And by bad, I mean whatever direction you're trading, the market can go against you in a heartbeat. Let me know what you think of this video and basically what you think of the market. Are you seeing signs of stagflation in your economy? How is the recent news events affecting the part of the world you live in? Let me know. Share your thoughts. If you like this kind of a video, please hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're not, to get more videos like this. Thank you for watching.